All right. Welcome to the Productivity Show. My name is Brooks. My usual co-host Han is away right now, but I'm really thankful to have Debbie Rosemont here, as I mentioned earlier. Debbie, how's it going?
It's great. It's really good to see and to be with you. We'll see, and for the podcast audio only listeners to chat with you today.
Exactly. So I did a little bit of an intro at the beginning, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, how you help people, that sort of thing.
Sure. I'm happy to. I am a certified professional organizer and a productivity consultant and coach. And I work with busy professionals who are tired of feeling disorganized and overwhelmed and help them finally have time for their priorities. So do that through group training in the corporate setting. I go into companies and offer workshops and group training for their employees, and also individual consulting and coaching. I've got a 6-month productivity transformation package and a small group as well. So can affect people in a variety of ways and touch on many topics that will impact somebody's productivity and sometimes that are getting in their way. You know, it's usually the too much email, too much stuff, too many meetings on the calendar, but you know the drill.
Well, I think people feeling disorganized and not knowing what their priorities are is about like 99% of the audience. So I think a lot of
That's right.
people are going to get a lot of value out of this. Those who
Good.
regularly listen to the podcast will know we start every episode with our top 3 resources. These are 3 things that we are loving or that are recommended every week. Usually Tannerai or Marmel does it, but when we have a guest on like Debbie, we like to open the floor and get some different perspectives. So Debbie, I understand you have 3 resources that you want to share with the audience. So maybe you can go right ahead.
I do. So one is a book, and it's called The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. And it's related to the topic that we have today. So I'll maybe touch a little bit more on the specifics as we get into the conversation. But from a understanding your personality, motivation, what drives you perspective, Gretchen Rubin says we fall into one of 4 tendencies. And when we know what that is, as well as the tendencies of those that we work or live most closely with, we can leverage those tendencies to our advantage. So I love that book. The second thing is the time timer. So this is an analog timer. And I know we're doing so much digitally these days, and that's super convenient. So, of course, you can use a timer on your phone or on your device, but sometimes we want to put those devices down or not be distracted by them. So the time timer is an analog timer that kind of shows the passage of time. So you set it for a certain amount of time that you either want to concentrate or have passed maybe before you do something, and you can see that time going away. So I use it to focus on certain tasks. When my kids were little, I used it to show them how much longer until I was available or how much longer they needed to do something to possibly delay gratification. Yes, you can watch TV and you need to read for 20 minutes first. So I really like the time timer for that purpose, and they come in different sizes. There is a digital version as well. And then the third resource that I'll share is really more of a philosophy, but based from a book as well. And that is the concept that I think the way we start our day and kind of launch into our day impacts our productivity in such a great way. So I've adopted personally, and like to talk to other people about, the SAVERS process. That's an acronym, SAVERS. And it is from the book, The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. Great book, great read. And that process really talks about a way to launch your day that's intentional, that's proactive, and that's grounding and positive, so that the rest of the day unfolds as you hope it will, rather than in a flurry of frustration and just frantic motion.
I love those picks. The savers routine actually had a really big impact on me years ago. I actually read a blog post about it before I read the book, but both were great. And the Four Tendencies is so funny because just yesterday in a team meeting we had, we were talking about that and how we can work more about more of the Four Tendencies in, because it's such a great book and resource as well. For the record, I am a through the roof obliger of the
Me too. Me
of
too.
the Four Tendencies, but
Yeah,
it's just interesting seeing different perspectives. So
agreed.
that's great. Thank you so much for sharing your resource. And we will have a link to all of these in the show notes, which will be right alongside the episode. All right. There's a million different ways and different directions we can go with this conversation. However, I wanted to talk to you more specifically. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about other things as well, but more specifically about accountability, which is such a big topic. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about it is we come up with podcast topics all sorts of ways. We get listener requests, we brainstorm them internally. Sometimes I'll have inspiration in the shower. But I think this has to be the first topic that ever came from a Facebook post. So you, a couple days ago, as we record this, made a great Facebook post talking about accountability, different ways that you kind of use it in this life and in your life, I should say. And this line in there just stuck out to me, and I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit, but basically what you said is, I use accountability to my advantage by always having a coach, being in a mastermind group, and having an accountability partner. And when I read that, the like alarm beside my computer, like podcast topic, dude, went crazy. And I thought this would be a great topic to talk about, because accountability is so important for reaching your goals or whatever it is that you're trying to do. But it's not something that I feel gets talked about enough. So I would love, if you're cool with it, I would love to unpack that statement in specifically, but then accountability in general. But maybe we should just start with the topic of accountability itself. Why do you think accountability is so important for whatever we're all trying to do?
Yeah, I think, I mean, to me, it is one of my favorite productivity strategies. And it doesn't have to cost a thing. Accountability really is accepting responsibility for our actions. And in the ways that we may talk about and that I posted about, sometimes it's engaging others to affirm that for us and help us be responsible for our actions, to follow through on the things we say we're going to do, or complete a commitment, or fulfill an obligation or an agreement we've made. So I think to me it's something, and again back to Gretchen Rubin's book, the Four Tendencies. You mentioned you're an obliger, as am I. So of her four tendencies, there's the upholder, the obliger, the questioner, and the rebel. And the obliger is somebody who may not honor promises and commitments they make to themselves. They might not be motivated enough to make those things a priority over things that they tell others that they're going to do. So asking others to hold us accountable, that works for us obligers. Upholders, they're going to have a lot of self-accountability. And when they say they're going to do something, they'll do that. Questioners will as well, once they believe it's the right thing to do. Rebels will be kind of the opposite. They're gonna do something because someone's told them they can't.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's perfect. So let's dive into this statement that you made about always having a coach, always being in a mastermind group, and always having an accountability partner. Because whenever we talk about accountability, we get a lot of questions about, how, that all sounds great, but how do you go about doing it? And I think of that like coach, mastermind, and accountability partner, almost like the accountability trifecta. I think of it as like three different perspectives, all
Right.
really valuable, and they can all work together.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned, let's start with the coaching part of it. You mentioned that you always have a coach.
Mhm.
Maybe you can talk about what it is that a coach does for you. What is a coach in your mind when you think of a coach and an accountability perspective? Maybe you can take us through the rhythm of how, say, a coaching relationship works, how that whole thing works.
Yeah. I think all of these, the trifecta, as you've called it, they all involve somebody else, again, that you're involving in some way to help you be accountable to something else. And I know I read a statistic that I think it was the Association of Training and Development put out recently that talked about, when we have an idea or a goal, that's usually not enough just having it to make us be successful. Consciously deciding to achieve it, we're going to increase our chance of success to 10 to 25% or so. But when we share it with somebody else, when we commit to somebody else, we're going to raise our chance even higher to like 65%. When we have a specific, like an appointment or an engagement with somebody else to do that thing and to check in about it, 95% success. So for me, I know having a coach, one is I'm a lifelong learner. I love to learn, and I also really believe strongly in not reinventing the wheel. So getting ideas, learning from others, and having somebody else motivate me or help me create a plan to follow. Those are different reasons that I've hired coaches in the past. And I've had specific coaches, business coach, sales coach, athletic coach. So depending on what it is I'm trying to achieve, I'll look for a coach to help in that regard. I think most people can relate to the idea of an athletic coach, right? I mean, we think about sports and teams always having a coach, and that is somebody that helps an individual athlete or a team achieve a goal. And often the goal is winning or succeeding in that sport. And in doing so, they're usually helping to clarify the goal. They're helping to help that individual to understand why they want it. Then to create a plan to help them reach that goal, and then to motivate and hold them accountable to doing that thing, right? And then along the way, being available to kind of tweak and adjust and say, well, this is working, let's do more of that. And we tried that, it's not working. Why don't we scale back on that and try something different? And those are the reasons that I have hired coaches in the past, and also the way that I coach others. So a coaching relationship often looks like getting clear on goals, understanding your why, having a plan of action, maybe, working to remove barriers, and then to check in regularly for accountability and adjustment's sake. And I'm trying to remember your great questions and talking about the coaching relationship, and tell me what else did you want to, another interesting note. So a benefit to working with a coach for me right now is somebody getting me to stretch possibly a little farther or do something that maybe is outside of my comfort zone, where there's value to doing that. And, it's nothing crazy that I feel like isn't a good calculated risk or something that I'm willing to try. But a perfect example is our conversation right now. So you mentioned you saw this on a Facebook post, and one of the things that my coach, current coach, has encouraged me to do is be more visible, to talk more about the work I do and how it might relate to everyday lives. And I did that, and you responded, and you weren't the only one to respond. So had I not been in a coaching relationship, maybe that post wouldn't have happened and we wouldn't be in conversation today. So that's just a very small, specific example of I did that post because I told her I would.
Yeah, it turns out Facebook is good for something other than finding out which of your relatives are racist, I guess. Yeah, the whole, and the funny thing is, you having a coach who stretches you, as you say, helps you think of things that you wouldn't otherwise have thought of. Somebody, maybe you personally are okay with putting yourself out there on social media, but maybe other people aren't. And a coach would kind of help put them in that direction. And it's so interesting. There are coaches for everything. I was just
Mhm.
reading a message in the message boards of NAPO, which I know we are both a member of, the
Mhm.
National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. And they were talking about having a tech coach. And that's something I never would have thought of having a technology coach. But if a technology is a area that maybe you're not as strong in and you
Mhm.
want to be stronger, then yeah, why not find a tech coach that will help you take you there. It's just fascinating. There's so many
Yeah.
different areas.
Agree. I agree. And I think I get behind, if there's something that this is a good example for me, hiring a tech coach probably wouldn't be a good fit for me because if I'm struggling with technology, that's not a strength or an interest. And so when I have trouble with technology, I would rather outsource to somebody else that problem to just do for me rather than
Yeah.
somebody to coach me to be able to do myself. There are other areas where I have either interest or intrigue, and I feel like, all right, well, I don't really dislike this thing. I bet I could learn to do it better. That's probably a better fit for getting a coach.
Now, if somebody is interested in this concept, how do you recommend somebody find a coach? Like it seems to me if you know somebody, you meet somebody at an event or something, maybe that's one thing. But do you have any recommendations for people finding somebody to coach them in some way?
Yeah, I think it's certainly a good search on the internet could result in something. So searching for, and we just talked about all these specific types of coaches. So what is it, and then fill in the blank coach. But I also think talking to other people. So if you know somebody that's had a good experience and you can get a personal referral, in my opinion, that's always a good way to go. So leveraging your network and asking, kind of putting it out there. Hey, I'm looking for somebody to help me in this area. Do you know anyone? I think personal referrals are golden.
So you mentioned this, but not only do you have a coach, but you also are a coach. That's a
Yes.
part of your business.
Yes.
Maybe you could share, not naming any names, obviously, but share some things that you see common that people struggle with. Are there any like low hanging fruit, anything that you see people coming to you for more than often? And what
Mhm.
sorts of things do you kind of help them do to get around that?
I would say one of the most common things that my coaching clients have when they come to me is overwhelm. So they want to do something or achieve something, but they feel overwhelmed and kind of stuck to even begin, or they may feel like they're spinning their wheels and just don't have enough time to do the thing. They're busy, but they don't have enough time. So I think with productivity coaching, it's helping people make the time, identify where there are maybe time wasters and things that they could stop doing in order to have time for the things that they want to do. So that overwhelm is definitely something that people have in common. And then I also find I work with a lot of people pleasers and a lot of people who have very consistently and for a long time put others first and other people's priorities first. So whether that's as a parent, whether that is just their servant leaders or servant hearted in nature, and are quick to say yes to other people, but are ready finally to say yes to things that they want to do that are important to them, and our priorities. And then I'd say the third is people that just don't understand why they haven't been able to accomplish something that they say is important to them. So helping them uncover, what is that barrier? What do they need to break down or overcome in order to move productively forward?
I guess it's kind of like we mentioned professional organizers earlier. I guess it's kind of similar to that, where maybe you're getting your place organized and you have and someone come in and you just need someone external to ask you, like, do you really need to keep those grunge
Mhm.
band t-shirts from the 90s? and
Yeah.
and then just having that extra person in asking those questions, and just without the emotion can be really
Yeah.
helpful. And I guess it's the same thing in this situation, where
Sure.
you have someone in, like, do you really have to do all this stuff first? Like, can you really not carve out, or is there not a way you can carve out X amount of
Right.
time just to focus on yourself? And just having that extra person without the emotional attachment, I can see how that would be super, super valuable.
Yeah. And I love to be able to kind of combine coaching and consulting. And the difference is that a coach believes that the answers are within the person that they're working with, and they're going to ask really good questions to draw those answers out, and that individual will really come up with their strategy and plan and process. Whereas a consultant has a toolkit of strategies to suggest, to recommend, and strategies, tools. And I like to combine those two. I feel like I effectively use both approaches to working with individuals, depending on the situation. So that's kind of fun for me to figure out what's needed.
All right, let's switch over to masterminds now, because this is something that gets talked about a lot on podcasts. We talk about it, talks about a lot on blog posts. And sometimes when we're talking about it in maybe our courses or in our community or something like that, somebody, and I'm so thankful they asked this question, they kind of raise their hand and say, what is a mastermind? A
Mhm.
mastermind is one of those terms that people who are kind of like in the world, it's so common that we don't really think of it, that for most most quote unquote normal people
Yeah.
in their careers don't have this kind of concept, or just haven't heard of that word for it. So maybe you can take us through what a mastermind is and how it
Mhm.
works, and what it kind of will help you with.
Yeah, I don't know what the official definition. We could look that up and include that in a post note. But to me, it's a mastermind is a collection of people that are putting their heads together, so many minds, to help each other out. So both to advance something that's important to them, but also in community to lift up the others in a group. So a mastermind, I just said a group of people. It can be a small group, it can be a larger group. My personal experience and success with masterminds has been group size no smaller than 5 or 6, and no larger than probably 10 or 12 on the upside. I've been in a couple of different types of masterminds, but that's what it is. It's a group of people that come together in various ways or formats, and work to put their minds together to help each other out. That sometimes looks like being a sounding board for each other, a brainstorming pod or collective, somebody to kind of hold a mirror up and say, hey, last time we talked, you said you were going to do this, and has that happened? So the accountability factor is definitely there as well when you're working within a group like this.
Is your experience mostly, and of course, as with all things, COVID has kind of thrown a wrench into
Mhm.
all of this, but
Yeah.
has your experience been mostly in-person masterminds where people physically get together, or virtual? Do you have experience one way or the other, or both?
Mhm.
And is there any
Both.
like
Yeah.
pros and cons that you've seen either way?
Yeah. So one of the earlier masterminds that I was a part of was a local group of professionals in different industries, all business owners. So we had that in common, and we met in person. And we met in person once a month, and then sent each other information, had the ability to ask questions and things in between. We did that via email. This was really before social media was much of a thing. There weren't necessarily good online ways to stay in touch. So that was an in-person mastermind, and like I said, different industries represented, and mix of male and female, mix of age. So it was a diverse group in that way. One that I'm in right now that I can give a different example for is primarily virtual, and that was prior to COVID. So this is a group I've been in now for a couple of years, and we're primarily virtual because we're all over the country. So it doesn't make practical sense to meet in person and to incur travel expense once a month, which is as often as we meet. But we do about twice a year, and I should say we did
Yeah,
twice
sure.
a year, to meet in person and do more of a retreat. So our monthly meeting is for a couple of hours, and that is virtual and has been from the beginning. But the, once or twice a year retreat goes over a few days and incorporates some kind of business masterminding with a social element, because one of the things that makes a mastermind successful, in my opinion, is kind of deep relationships and trust and credibility amongst the members. So that in person, I think it's a easier way to achieve that, especially if you have a little bit longer to spend together than strictly virtual. But I know that virtual works as well, because we've been virtual certainly for the last year.
What's the time commitment like with masterminds, in the sense that, you mentioned you meet a couple hours a month and then you have that retreat, which sounds fun. But is it like an ongoing thing as well, in your experience? Or is it, you just kind of like talk when you meet and then everyone's left to their own devices in between?
I think that could be up to the group. And I know some coaches run paid mastermind groups as well. I haven't really had, I have a membership group, but I don't consider it a mastermind group. So it could depend on whoever is setting up and structuring the group relationship. But for the mastermind that I'm in currently, we do meet a couple hours once a month. We have a rotating meeting facilitator, as well as rotating what we call hot seats. So of the members, we have 2 each month that have some more focused time on a problem, a challenge, something that they want to put out there. So both the facilitator and those in the hot seats might spend some time preparing for that monthly meeting prior to that, maybe an hour or so in preparation. And then in between our meetings, we have a private Facebook group where if somebody has a need, a question, or a challenge, or just wants to share something that they think the others would be interested in, they'll post it in that Facebook group. And we have all committed to keeping our eye on that and being responsive. So not everybody will respond every time. If you don't have something of value to add, it's not required that you just put in something random, but we get pretty good participation.
If this all sounds good, do you have any tips for finding a mastermind? Somebody's like, oh, this sounds exactly what I need. Like, do you have any suggestions on finding a mastermind, or maybe starting a group of your own if you don't have one around? Like, do you have an experience there? I mean, obviously you do, because you joined a few.
Yeah. As I think to how both the examples that I provided, the multi-industry, and then I didn't say, but the one I'm in right now is a within industry mastermind. And I have seen value to both types. That the mixed industry mastermind, I got perspectives from different industries outside of mine and how things worked there and could they work in my industry. The within industry mastermind, the women that are in it, and it happens to be just women, they completely get it as far as what are probably shared at some point challenges are and that sort of thing. So I think both of them stemmed from a larger organization. So being a part of an association or a networking group or organization, you may find that people are already there because they're interested in growing their business or forwarding some goals. You may have some things in common already. And if you're interested in starting your own mastermind, I would just suggest, kind of making a list of who would you like to include. I know that I know somebody else that calls their mastermind their board of directors. And so when she started her mastermind, she intentionally said, if I were to create a board of directors, I would want to have somebody that was good at the financial aspect of business, and somebody that was good at the sales aspect of business, and somebody that was good at the social media. And so she basically invited people in these various areas of expertise, and she made sure that she had something of value to give to them as well, so that it wasn't truly like a board of directors that you might pay or engage in a consulting type of arrangement.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of opportunities to join or start masterminds if it's something you're kind of looking for. I was a part of one for a while, and it
Mm-hmm.
started by a group of people having drinks one night at a conference, and just hanging out. And then
Mm-hmm.
somebody had the idea. I don't even remember who it was. Hey, we should start a mastermind and meet every month or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it kind of went from there. And
That's
there's
right.
all these sorts of opportunities of finding like-minded people if it's something that we're looking for.
That's right. So yeah, I think a conference, an association, a community organization, those would be all places that I might think to, consider, are there some members here that could work together well outside of the larger organization?
All right, so let's move on to accountability partners because I'm really curious of your perspective on this. You talked about having a coach and being a coach. You've also
Mhm.
talked about having an accountability partner. How do you see having an accountability partner is different? If it is, I mean, maybe it's the same thing, but how do you see that is different from having an actual formal coach?
Yeah, I think an accountability partnership is typically a two-way exchange, where two people are both saying, hey, I want to tell you what I'm up to, and I'd like you to help hold me accountable. And I, in return, will do the same for you. I think a coaching relationship, while it's still a two-way exchange, often it is one person stating what they want to accomplish, and the exchange is the coach holds them up accountable, typically for a fee. So coaches are usually hired and paid a fee, and providing accountability is one of the things that they exchange for that fee. So that's the primary difference that comes to mind when I hear you ask that question. Typically, a coach, when you hire a coach, you're going to hire a coach that has done this before. They, unless they're a brand new coach, but they either have, coaching certification or education or training to help people coach, or to help coach people to get results. And so they're not going to be wondering how to help you. They know how to help you. Now, again, each individual experience certainly will be different. I don't help exactly the same way in every client I work with, but an accountability partnership, on the other hand, maybe neither people have engaged in an accountability relationship before, so it might be new, and that's okay. So those are some of the primary differences.
Is there any kind of general characteristics or circumstances you think somebody should look for or maybe avoid if they want to find an accountability partner? Like, is it better, or not better, maybe is the wrong word, but should it be like a friend, a family member, a coworker, or is it better to have somebody a little more arm's length? I
Yeah.
guess there's pros and cons to both, but do you have any thoughts either way on that?
Yeah, I think it needs to be somebody that you can trust. I think it needs to be, and to trust, both to be somewhat open and sometimes vulnerable with, especially if you're talking about struggles with maybe why you didn't get to do something that you said you would, and sometimes it is kind of unpacking what's going on there. So somebody that you can be somewhat vulnerable with, somebody that, if it's important to you, will hold your conversations in confidence. Again, a coach, certainly that's going to be part of their practice. I guess I shouldn't generalize, but I know that that's part of mine, is the confidentiality, the non-judgmental approach, is definitely something that you could expect from a coach, and I would look for in an accountability partner as well. So somebody that's not going to judge you, but on the other hand, that is going to be, I guess firm maybe is the word, that will hold your feet to the fire, or that will call you out on something that is different or is unfolding in a different way than you had committed to, and somebody that's dependable. So whether that's, we can think, well, a family member might check off all those marks. But I also think that somebody who can take an objective view to what's going on for you could be helpful. And that family member might be too close in that regard. It's possible that that could work. So family member, friend, like the mastermind, I have had different accountability partnerships over the years. And my first kind of formal accountability partnership came out of the same, with you, with your mastermind. It came from a conference. It was a NAPO conference. I remember it really well. It was in Boston, I think 2007 maybe. And I, towards the end of the conference, just connected personally with somebody else about, when we had conversation coming out of a session that we had been in, about the session, about where we were taking our respective businesses, about what we were wanting to accomplish. And, like you with that mastermind group, we just said, you know what? Let's keep in touch. Let's follow up, because we both kind of said, hey, here's what I'm going to do immediately after this conference. So we scheduled an appointment to connect a few weeks later to report in on progress. And that is where my first accountability partnership stemmed, is that we had both made this commitment. We both agreed to the frequency that we would talk, the duration, how our conversations would go. And again, because she was within my industry at the time with what I was trying to accomplish, that was a really good fit, because she understood my clientele, my challenges, and the direction I wanted to go. Fast forward to now, I have an accountability partner that is not in my industry at all. He is younger than I am. You may hear me saying he. So before I had a same gender relationship. This is a mixed gender accountability partnership, and the perspective that is so different than mine can be really helpful too. So like the mastermind, having had in industry and out of industry, having, somebody that's very similar to me in many ways and someone that's really different from me in many ways, I can say both would work. It might just depend on what you're trying to accomplish.
I love that line, unfolded in a different way than you had committed to. I'm going to use that with my kids.
Uh-huh.
How do you walk that line between holding people accountable and then being annoying and naggy? I mean, if you're a coach, it's one thing, because you're still not going to be judgmental, like you said, but
Right.
they're paying you to drop the hammer on them in a gentle and supportive way.
Right.
Accountability partner might be a little different thing. So how do you hold people accountable without being annoying, I guess?
Yeah. I think just being curious, and I think that approach, that works for me in coaching as well. But I might say to somebody, if you and I were accountability partners and you had told me last week you were going to do this thing and it was your priority, and no matter what, you were going to get it done. And then we were connecting this week to have you report in and I'd be reporting in on things. And you said, yeah, I just didn't get to that. So in order to hold you accountable, I would start by just getting curious. Well, that's interesting. What got in your way, or what you decide instead? Or, so I'd be asking questions to, hopefully get at, well, again, what unfolded differently than you had said it would. So I think getting curious is a non-judgmental place to come from. And in doing so, then we have a conversation and you get to decide, is this thing still a priority? Now, if a couple of weeks pass, if we're connecting weekly and you keep saying, oh yeah, I deferred that, I didn't do that, then I might take a different approach. And I might say, okay, Brooks, it sounds to me like this isn't really a priority. Do I have that right? Is something changed for you? So I would probably, put it out there saying, this is what you said was important, but yet, your actions aren't matching your words. So I'll call you out on it. That's part of what we've agreed to do when we started an accountability partnership together. So, a soft approach that becomes a little firmer if that's needed. And then, continuing to just assess the accountability partnership and is it working for both people? It needs to be two-way, where both people feel like they're in a position to both get and give value.
All right, we've talked about the, as I call it, the accountability trifecta of coaches, mastermind groups, and accountability partners.
Yeah,
That's not the whole accountability story, though, because that's like pretty heavily, in all cases, is pretty heavily relying on other people for
right.
accountability, which some of us need, frankly,
Yep.
or at least benefit from, I guess I would say. But what about, is there a way that you can kind of close the loop and have some self accountability? Is there a way you can do some of this without necessarily relying on other people?
Yeah, there are a number of things that I can think about. Is discipline is one of the words that comes to mind. And when we talked about like an upholder or somebody who says they're going to do something and they just honor that, they just do it. Some of us that are obligers or we want to be more self accountable, we need to maybe put some tricks into play. So time blocking or scheduling things that you say are important, where you're actually identifying when you're going to do it, can help you be accountable if you honor what's on your calendar. And I know that you guys have talked about time blocking before. So it's not a new productivity strategy, but as far as an accountability strategy to yourself, for me, if it's on my calendar, if I don't honor it, then I start to not trust my calendar. So that's one thing. I think reminding yourself about why something is important, if you've said that it is, that you intend to do. So sometimes we can do that through like a visual. So having a vision board, or having some visual reminder, changing your screensaver on your phone or your device to be a visual of what you're trying to do. So having those reminders can be helpful. Tracking progress. So having some system, and there's various apps and tools to help you do that. The other thing I like about tracking is if you're committing to building a habit or being consistent with something, then you can get into, and then this helps with self-accountability as well, you can get into a streak where, and this long time ago, Seinfeld had a don't break the chain episode or visual also, where, there was something he was doing and he would make a big X in the calendar day when he did that. And after having, 3 or 4 X's, he didn't want to have a blank space, so he kept doing the thing. And so seeing visual tracking where your count of days doing something, consistency goes up, or the variety of things. I use Headspace as a meditation app, and I'm like at 1,400 days of meditating in a row. And that was something I paid more attention to when I first started that habit, because I wanted it to be something that I did every day. Now I don't necessarily need that tracking. It's just part of my morning routine and something that I do, like I brush my teeth. But it's interesting to see those numbers go up, and that can be self-motivating. And again, I don't want to lose that now that I've built it up.
Yeah.
So that's another idea. And then the last, I guess, I was thinking about this morning. We have a treadmill, and I was on the treadmill and thinking about, okay, I set out to do this run, and I was feeling tired, but I had told myself I'd do this run. And one of the things that helped me be accountable to doing it was seeing, and maybe this is the kind of external thing, there's a leaderboard, and I'm kind of competitive. So had I stopped my jogging and walked, I would have fallen on the leaderboard, and the competition in me said, no, you can do it. You can stay towards the top half at least. So there was that, even though there's no communication
Yep.
amongst the other people, there was no no accountability, really. Nobody else cared or was invested in what I was doing, just seeing that there were other people involved. So I think we could try and find ways to build that in, to help hold ourselves accountable to things, as well as think about how can you have competition or community in a friendly way too.
All right. This has been super, super helpful. We always like to wrap up with with an action item, like some action that we recommend that people take to actually implement some of the stuff that we talked about. So if you were going to recommend one thing to somebody who wanted to either get started with accountability, or it could be anything else, any other productivity related action that you think would be helpful, what is like one thing that somebody should put on their calendar, as you said, and make sure to take action on after this episode?
I would say find an accountability partner. And that can just be an individual, or it could be coach as accountability partner. But that statistic that I shared earlier from the Association of Training and Development that says when we have an appointment to check in with somebody, our chance of success raises to 95%. To me, that's compelling and that's powerful. So I think an accountability partner where there are scheduled and regular opportunities to check in, and that can be a variety of ways. It can be by email, it can be, a Zoom or a video conference, a phone call, or in person if that feels safe and local. I think an accountability partner could be a simple and effective first step. Is I find somebody and set that relationship up.
All right. If anybody has any questions about anything that we talked about today, if they want to learn more about the things that you do, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but where, assuming you want them to, I suppose, where can people get in touch or at least find more about the stuff that you do?
Yeah, so our website is itssimplyplaced.com. So www.itssimplyplaced.com. I know that you'll graciously put that in the show notes as well. That is one place. I do run a free group on Facebook that's called Organize to Optimize that people can certainly join me in, and we can have more conversation about accountability there. On most social media platforms, my handle is @simplyplaced. So I welcome connection on really any of those platforms. There's a few resources on our website that are free and ways to stay in touch. So just encourage you to reach out. And I love to have conversation like this. I just am very passionate about people making time for what matters to them. And accountability is such a great strategy. So I thanks so much for the opportunity to chat today.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Debbie. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks to you all for listening. And like Debbie said, we'll have links to all this stuff, the Facebook group, her website at simplyplaced.com. And the social media, we'll have it all in the show notes that accompany this episode. So thank you all, and we'll see you next Productive Monday.